People at the back may not be able to see me. Let me just make sure things are, yeah. Okay, good evening. My name is Tricia Yeoh. As introduced, I am from Ideas, but I don't represent Ideas tonight. I'm also doing my PhD in political science. So just to let you know, I'm not affiliated to any side, and so my views are really just my own. I have been working in public policy and analysis and research and so on for the last 10 over years in various different capacities in think tanks. I also had a short stint in the Selangor MB's office in the first term of government, so have a little bit of experience within the civil service as well. So just to give you a bit of background as to who I am. So tonight, you're all here because I think the title seemed to be very enticing. I think whoever came up with that title wanted all of you to be here for general elections, the mother of all elections. Whether or not you agree with that, who here agrees that the next election will be the mother of all elections? Okay, well, thanks for giving your show of hands. Before we get into the election talk, I also wanted to say a bit about how, in 3 days' time, we are celebrating Malaysia Day on the 16th of September. We are celebrating basically 54 years of Malaysia's existence. And I think it's also a good season for us to think about where we are as a nation. I think many of the surveys, and perhaps we don't even need surveys to show that the majority of Malaysians actually feel that the country is not heading in the right direction. You may agree or disagree, but I think that's a good season to think about where the country is, as well as when we're heading toward the next elections. Okay, so elections. We all know that the next election will have to take place anytime between now and August of next year. Initially, many people were speculating that it would be held this year, but I think our Prime Minister is not a very risk-taking Prime Minister, and so we are looking at something that will happen next year. So we still have about a year for us to think about issues and so on. I won't speak too long because I think we have a lot of questions from the floor, but I just wanted to talk about why I think this coming election will be an extremely important one, and about why I think Malaysia now more than ever is really at a crossroads. If you look over the last 9 or over 10 years, those of us who remember the hopes, the visions that we felt when 2008 took place, just a little bit of a historical recap. Especially when Selangor changed, I think that was the most emotional moment for me because I live in Selangor, I'm a voter there. And I was almost in tears because for such a long time, we never thought that change would happen, and here was a glimmer of hope. So you had 2008 happen, and then you had the first term, and you had 2013 happen, which again, a lot of disappointment. But let's not forget that in 2013, the popular vote actually went to the opposition. If you look at the majority of votes in total, were actually larger for the opposition. But because of the way the seats are delineated and so on, we know, of course, that Barisan still won. And then after 2013, I think that's when a lot of things started to deteriorate. I think the hope that we felt in the early years of 2008 started to dissipate a little bit when we started seeing more and more issues of race and religion being played up. And now, right now, we're in 2017. I think the country is at rather a low point. And then this is the sentiment that we have as we head into the next election. It is definitely not the same emotion that we felt after the early years in 2008 of the new political era. Okay, I didn't intend to say all that, but now I have the chunk of what I did actually want to say in my speech. I tried to classify it into 4 easy ways to remember about why I think this election is very important, and we all need to care, and we all need our young people to care. The first C is basically the conditions of the economy. Now recently, Prime Minister gave a very heartwarming speech to the Invest Malaysia conference. I don't know if any of you read that speech. He talked during the conference about how economically sound we are, and in fact now even he's right in another country talking to another leader of another country, no guesses who, as to our GDP rates, right? He's talking about how we've grown 5.8% this year so far, but the reality on the ground is very, very different, and I'm going to read out several things that perhaps might change your mind as to whether the economy is doing well. So the economic activity in most sectors actually fell year on year from 2015 to 2016. You're talking about the major heart of the economy, things like manufacturing, agriculture, construction. This one's quite worrying. We have a very high household debt of 88.5% of the GDP and growing as well. And the worst hit are actually the civil servants. The QPAX actually estimates that 100,000 civil servants are at risk of bankruptcy. So that their financial literacy is very low. Bank Negara also reports that 3 out of every 4 Malaysians would find it hard to raise 1,000 ringgit in times of emergency. So imagine if somebody fell ill in your family, they would not, 3 out of 4 Malaysians cannot even scrape together 1,000 ringgit. So the savings rate is very low. Unemployment rate is also on the rise. It was up to 3.5% last year. But these are just numbers, right? I mean, I'm just talking about a bunch of numbers. I think the real thing would be to ask all of you whether you feel that the economy is actually improving or stagnating. Second C is actually the cost of living, which is linked to the first point. We do know that the CPI is on the rise, inflation rates are on the rise. We know that wages are not rising fast enough to keep up with the cost of living. There's a lot of concern about the GST. Of course, the GST is just one of many taxes. GST, it's a contentious issue. I know that the opposition has said that they will abolish GST if they come to power. But I think they also need to be responsible in finding out where the alternative finances are going to come if not for GST. I think the main thing is that in times like these, the reason why our cost of living is quite high is because private citizens actually have to seek private solutions for the failures of public infrastructure. By that I mean that all of us have to take toll highways, right? And toll highways are private. You do not, in an ideal situation, the highways already exist. We do have highways, highway boards that actually should be able to provide good highways. Many of our households have, water filters. Do you have water filters in your houses? Do you take private insurance, for instance? Do you buy your own private insurance? Do you go to private hospitals? Do you bring your children to private schools? So that's what I mean by the fact that these are all essential government services that if government had been able to do well enough, private citizens like us don't have to cough up our own pocket money to provide better, living circumstances for ourselves. Why do you need to install not even 1 but 2 water filters in your house? So in that sense, I think that, and the thing is, Malaysia is not, well, now perhaps that's changed, but Malaysia as a country is completely well endowed with natural resources. We are situated in a wonderful geographical location. We have oil, we have tin, we have rubber, palm oil. We actually are in the perfect position to be able to provide very well for its citizens. Why is it that citizens have to privatize our own, cost of living in that sense and quality of life? Okay, the third C, corruption. One of the projects that we did, because I work in a think tank called Ideas, was to try and boost the position of Malaysia in the Corruption Perception Index, and that was supposed to be our indicator of success this year. But unfortunately, we failed very dismally because Malaysia actually fell in the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, the CPI. And it's not just about the perception, right? So sometimes government will say that, oh, it's just perception, you know, that one is not really accurate because it doesn't measure corruption per se. But perception is a good indication because people like you and me are involved on a daily basis, doing transactions with government. We know whether or not bribes have to be paid. So I think also the elephant in the room, which we probably cannot go home tonight without talking about, is the investigations that are taking place for such a long time now, right, on 1MDB. And it's a case that is so difficult for people to understand. I think even public policy people, even financial analysts will find it really hard because it's so complicated. It involves so many different countries around the world. You know, you compare that to like a previous corruption case, which was the Cowgate scandal. You all remember that? Yeah, so that was easy for people to remember because it's got a physical animal that's tied to it, and you could also go down to the kampung and talk about it. But 1MDB is a huge entity that's hard to explain. But the reality is that government-linked companies like these that go down and if are bailed out by government are the things that you and your children and your generations to come will have to pay back for. So what government actually says is that, oh yes, 1MDB or any other scandal, that's already resolved because we've paid up already, you know, government has paid up. Yes, government has paid up, but where is it paying it from? It's paying it from the monies that are collected from your taxes, right? You pay income tax, you pay corporate tax, you pay tax when you go every day, your GST, you go on tolls. Basically, all that money goes into bailing out companies that are unfortunately very, very poorly managed. And it's not just that one company. There are thousands and thousands of many other GLCs that nobody knows about. Imagine this, the Ministry of Finance even does not even know how many GLCs there are in this country. I know because we asked them. This shows you that there's so many loopholes for mismanagement, and unfortunately, I think the idea and the concept of conflict of interest just doesn't exist. Finally, and this is also really important, my fourth C would be the control over institutions. So we all know about scandals that take place, but in other countries, it's fine. You have a corruption scandal, like in the UK, if you remember, there was a member of parliament who was caught for just paying out some claiming more expenses than he was supposed to. Very, very small amounts, but he was caught and there was a system that could deal with that. The problem here is that scandals can happen and there's no recourse. I think the institutions that I'm talking about here would be like the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, the MACC. Ultimately, the MACC still reports to the Prime Minister. So what happens when there are investigations taking place against the executive body? There's the institution of the AG, the Attorney General's Chambers. This one is a little bit complicated to understand, but basically we have an Attorney General as well as the public prosecutor in the same person, meaning that the Attorney General, who is the government's lawyer, the government's advisor, is also the public prosecutor, who is the person who's supposed to bring cases against the government. So how can you have the same person being both the AG and the PP, right? The police, the judiciary, the election commissions, all these institutions are compromised because of the centralization of powers into the executive and the Prime Minister. Another institution which is not supposed to be under government, which is very, very important for all of us to know about what's happening, would be the media. Do you think the media is free in this country? Okay, so you guys know the answer. Maybe you should come here and speak. I mean, technically speaking, anyone can set up a media company, but the circumstances are in which that you have a slew of different laws, and I think later Dato Ambiga can go on to talk about the laws. We have the essential thing is that we don't operate in an environment where information can be freely exchanged and freely open for access. There's the Printing Presses and Publications Act, there's the Sedition Act, there's all kinds of acts that perhaps have made you worried about whether you can say certain things online or on Facebook or even on WhatsApp now, right? But I guess my answer to that would be don't be scared, okay? Don't fear. So, what are we going to do about it? I mean, right now you have a situation where we've always tried to push for more competitive politics. Like I said earlier, in 2008, we all felt that this was the chance, this was it, to have a two-party system. By and large, I would say that it has been the longest successful opposition coalition to date in Malaysia's history. Opposition has tried many times before this, but failed. But this is the first time from 2008 till now that it has actually led several state governments and actually survived. I mean, yes, there are a lot of infighting and a lot of dirty linen being washed in public, which I think Fahmi will answer later. But my point is this, that this is an experiment that actually, to a large extent, is the most successful. But we can go into the details later. I think ultimately, my point is that politics is always messy, it's never easy. Many of us try to wait for the right and perfect conditions before we you know, bank in on something. But all around the world, you see that politics isn't as easy as we once thought it would be. At one point, we all thought that, you know, especially after the Cold War, we would move towards greater democratization of the world. But you see now that there are trends all around the world. I mean, look at the US, look at Brexit, you know, even in Europe as well, they are also contending with far-right political parties. So I guess what I'm saying is that if you don't think that the conditions are right now, they will never be right. We have to think about the big picture. We have to think about what is long-term for the country. We have to look at the candidates and the parties that we think will provide us the best solution given the right circumstances to survive under these difficult conditions. Yeah, I think the only real thing that we can do is to actually put your vote where it counts. Democracy is many things. It's about voting, it's also about participating in the process as much as you can. If you're all here and you're living in Bangsar, do you know which local council governs you? Yeah, DBKL, right? Do you know much about DBKL? You do? You do know? Oh, I'm very happy that you know about DBKL because I think most of us don't. But the point is that DBKL as a local council ideally should be giving you a lot more information, right? Do they tell you how much money they spend on you every year? Do they tell you how they're going to spend their money before they spend it? So that's ideal. And in many other advanced societies, we do have ideals where there's a lot more participatory democracy. But right now, the minimum at least that we do have is the vote once in 5 years. And I suppose that we should take that minimum that we can, and in between that, we do strive to fight for other ways of getting our opinions to count. But we'll talk more about this later. So that's all for now. Some 4 C's, and we'll go more into discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tricia. Next up, we have Dato Ambiga.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I think Tricia has covered quite a bit, but what I'd like to start with is really what is at stake for all of us, for Malaysians, in the next general elections. I think you've had some idea of what we're up against. And I think, and I'm going to say this, and then I'll explain why I'm saying it, I think we must have a change of government in the next general elections. It's not that I'm taking sides, okay? But it is in the interests of democracy that we change the government. it is not healthy for any country to have a government in power for 60 years. We are suffering the consequences of that. Why do you think there's rampant corruption? Why do you think there is unchecked abuse of power? Why do you think it is so easy for those in power to compromise the institutions? They've just been there way too long. They've had 60 years. Let's make sure it's not 61. And that, I think, should be our goal. You see, I'm utterly horrified, to be quite honest. I thought things were bad enough many years ago. And that we had come to a new low. But when you think that, you then read in the newspapers the next day, and then there's things that happen that make you realize it can go even lower than that. Today was one of the lowest of lows when I read what our Prime Minister gave so generously to the United States of America, who needed it so badly. You know, they need our money so badly that he had to go all the way there and pledge money from, I mean, EPF may already have investments there to buy these Boeing jets and so on. So it was all about going there and in typical Najib style, pay, because that's how you win favors, you see. That's how he got himself into the White House. So that's what our Prime Minister is doing. And all it was if you look at the exchange of conversation, Trump just said welcome and so on and honor and all these words. And our Prime Minister just said, I'm giving you this, I'm giving you that, I'm giving you this, I'm giving you that. That was the exchange. What were we getting back in return? I don't know. In fact, nothing. Zilch. Except 30 minutes or even less with the President of the United States. Now, what kind of responsible leader does that? When the country, you've heard it from Tricia, in fact it's heartbreaking when you hear the numbers actually, and how much Malaysia is capable of, and what the situation we're at now. As you say, people find difficulty raising 1,000 ringgit. And what are we doing? Billions on jets. I'm not sure we need all of that actually. Billions on jets. Then promising infrastructure. I bet you that infrastructure is the wall, okay? I take a bet. I take a bet we're paying for that wall. I will be very upset, okay? Sorry. Not Mexico, us. The other M. But here you are. How is that justifiable at all? But we can ask questions. We will not get any answers. All you get are the sycophants here saying how wonderful it was and so on. I mean, not too long ago we were whacking the United States, right? Saying how terrible they are with what they're doing with DOJ. Today it's a different story. Anyway, that's politics. But at the end of the day, and this comes out of a government being in power for too long, it's the complacency and the fact that they know that in the present system they can get away with anything. And that's why we're suffering. Because as Tricia said, if we had honest brokers, if we had an honest government, can you imagine what a wonderful life we could all have? And it's time for us to reclaim that life. And that's why it is imperative that in the next general elections, we make sure that that we don't give them a single year more in power. It's good for them too. Because what it will mean is there will be a refreshment, as it were, of leadership. The opposition goes in. If they don't do a good job, out they go in the next general elections. By then, hopefully, Barisan would have changed, would have realized that they have to do things better. And then things keep getting better and better. And that's what democracy is about. It's holding these people in power to account. Now, the other thing is, if you recall recently, the Prime Minister said, the federal constitution, if you want the unilateral conversion bill to go through, did you read that? If you want it to go through, give us 2/3. That is their aim in the next general elections. 2/3 majority. We must make sure they never get 2/3 majority again, because if they do, That's the end. We will never recover from it. Now, what he said was not even accurate, because if he had put that bill through before Parliament, I have no doubt that most members of the opposition would have voted for it already, would have voted for it anyway. Which means you don't need to have 2/3 majority to push the unilateral conversion bill through. It would have gone through anyway. But they didn't put it to the floor. They withdrew it. So this is the kind of teasing they do, you know, misleading of the public. Oh, you want something? Give us more power than we already have. How can that be an argument to give someone more power, really? So that those more lawlessness, okay, and almost a disrespect for the law by those in leadership positions in particular, but also by other members of the public. For example, one of the things that worries me also is political violence, and I will talk about that later, one of the challenges that we face. The Tamil Malar incident. I mean, wholly unacceptable conduct by a politician, a deputy minister. Wholly unacceptable conduct. How can you go in there with a group of men because you don't like a newspaper article, and I'd like to see some action taken? And the tragedy is no one from the leadership, from that party, came out and condemned this unacceptable conduct. Now, if we don't condemn this unacceptable conduct and put a stop to it, it's going to become a habit. And in fact, it is becoming a habit, this kind of violence. So, is that what we want to see? You see, this kind of violence suits those who are in power because it creates fear in people. And they live by the fear that people have. For example, the secrecy of the vote, which is critical for me, for a voter. Your vote must be secret. But an EC will come out and swear blind that it is secret. And it is secret, by the way. And I'll explain later why it's difficult for them to know how you vote. But what some people are going around telling this, particularly the civil servants, they're telling them, actually, we know how you vote. So you better vote for the government. Because these people come and tell me, oh, no, I'm government service, I have to vote for the government. See? So, you will get this going on and on. And of course, you know my stand on whether our elections are free and fair. The answer is a resounding no. They have never been free and fair. But I suspect it's going to be one of the worst this time. I said that the last time, it just keeps getting worse. Because they're more desperate to stay in power. So, these are the reasons why we must bring change for the good of the country, for the good of the people. It's not that, you know, people will jump up and say, how can you be biased? You're supposed to be NGO, you cannot take sides. What sides am I taking? I'm saying it's good for the country. It's good for democracy. What sides am I taking? I'm saying if the opposition doesn't perform, out they go too. And you know I'm one of the biggest critics of the opposition as well. They are my friends, but I expect high standards. So that's the way it goes. So really we should think about it that way. And say, look, you know, BN, you rehat lah sikit, tak apalah. You just take a break, alright? Let the opposition in there, let's see how well they do, and give them a chance. You see, it's not also just about giving a chance. It's about getting rid of sicknesses like corruption. The corruption in this country has grown to such a level. Even those who were corrupt 20 years ago are appalled at the level of corruption now, because it's gone beyond beyond belief. Okay, so because they said, hey, I took a little bit lah. This one, oh wow, this is too much. Okay, so here we are. This is the position we're in. But you know what? It's a tragedy, and they continue. You know, MACC has been doing a reasonable job, yeah? They've been going after some people. But they're all lower level people, do you realize that? And even they, do you see the numbers that are involved in their corrupt activities? It's more money than many of us will ever see in a month or a year or in 10 years. And that kind of corruption has been going on for years. How can any system survive that? So I will end here because I will talk about other challenges. I'm sure you all want to talk about the three corner fights and so on, which we will do later. But I want to end here by saying, however, whatever mistakes the opposition is making right now, it is still important we vote for them. It is very important that we vote for them and bring change for the sake of the country. And Barisan can go away and they can prepare themselves and fix themselves up and then maybe come back the time after that to put forward a proper challenge and not stay in power by irregular means, because that is what is going to really destroy this country, and it is destroying this country. You can see it. I can tell you, we should ask befrienders to do a survey on the mental state of, I'm not kidding, yeah, on how people feel about what's happening in the country. And I'm pretty certain, and apparently some of them are getting more phone calls now than they had before, because people are genuinely worried and depressed about what's going on in this country. It's not good for our psyche to have to face this. You see, when I vote a government, I expect them to get on with the job so that I can get on with my job, bring up my family, enjoy whatever I want to enjoy, just focus on my profession. I don't want to have to keep watching them every minute of the day. We are not meant to be doing that. They're supposed to be doing their jobs. So that's what I want for Malaysia. I want for Malaysia the kind of elections that you see in other countries. You go, you vote, you come back, you put the TV on, you sit there with a cup of tea and you enjoy the results, or you don't enjoy the results. You don't worry, we don't have to stand there and guard the boxes, you know. They don't have to do all of that, you know. You don't have to have teams rushing and making sure illegal people are not voting. I mean, what nonsense is this? By the way, we have to do that, next election. We need all the manpower for that. So that's what I'm looking for. And I think we really must make sure that we don't have another 5 years of this. Thank you.
Be it to register people as voters or as parchas or even with the pemantau team, anything for the upcoming election, please do get in touch with either your ADUN or your MP or anyone who's in this circle, so that we actually really do need all the manpower that we can get with the upcoming generation. Next up, the little mistake that I did just now, Fahmi Fadzil is actually PKR's communication director. So without further ado, get it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Nalina. Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. 我们朋友大家好，大家好。Saudara-saudari Wanakkam. So, dah ready for elections already, ya? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Assalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So I can also meet with the people in Panelist as well as people in Bangsar. So prepare. I think those of you who came here tonight came here with a particular expectation. I think you came here with a particular sense of really what is at stake. Whether you are voting in Kuala Lumpur, in Lebah Pantai, in Petaling Jaya, in any other part of Malaysia, I think you are all very, very concerned about where things are at the moment. You are very, very concerned about where things appear to be going, and also where they might really end up. I remember I was just talking to one of you just now, and there was a memory in 2013, on the eve of elections. We had a big rally out here, and there was a tent, and I spoke. At that time, I was helping Tricia in the campaign in Lebah Pantai. And I mentioned that my wife was pregnant and she was due to give birth at any moment. And my son was actually supposed to be born any day at that time, in May of 2013. And I said at that time, my wife was not relaxing at home, but she was actually helping friends like Seksan make these little flags to plant all over the country. And my hope, my wish at that time was that when my son is born, after election day, that he would be born into a better Malaysia. My son was late by a week. I think he didn't want to come out, so we had to have a C-section and extract him. So I think maybe that, for me personally, was a sense of, maybe the cosmos was saying something. That maybe my son is not, ready to be born, and we have to just pull him out. And the perfect conditions don't exist, but this is what we have at the moment. And I think that is where we are right now. In any other democracy, it's quite baffling where you have the leader of the opposition sent to prison. It's very, very troubling in any other democracy where you have the Attorney General removed because there are suspicions of investigations on the Prime Minister. In any other democracy, the party of the government would not have allowed all those people in its party to be removed because they wanted to be the voice of conscience within their party to say that there's something wrong with Mr. Number One. In any other democracy. But this is Malaysia. Malaysia boleh. Malaysia boleh macam-macam. And I think, unfortunately, this is the big problem that we have today. 5 years ago, I had black hair. I'm still thankful I have hair. My father is here. He still has hair, kind of. So I know that some years from now, I'll still have hair, but I'm graying. And I see that a lot of my friends who joined politics. I mean, the reason I joined politics, I'm trained as a chemical engineer. I could be anywhere right now. In fact, many of my friends are everywhere except Malaysia. And just this afternoon, I was speaking to a lady who works with an NGO, and I asked her, what is your wish for Malaysia? And what is your wish for yourself? Because Malaysia Day is coming. And she said, my wish for myself is for my family to be home. My wish is for all of my family to be back in Malaysia. And my wish for the country is that I wish that things would be set right so that we can have a better and brighter Malaysia for all Malaysians. And this is just an ordinary, auntie, ordinary lady. The fact of the matter is, my fear is that if we don't take heed of what has been said, a lot more of young people will leave. A lot more of you might leave the country. And what would happen to our country then? I'm worried. And I think we had besides being the communications director, I'll share with you some things. I also sit in the Presidential Council of Pakatan Harapan, as well as several other committees. I sit in too many committees. And one of the leaders recently said, I won't name the name, but he said, basically, gentlemen, do you know what is at stake here? If we don't make it, we are all going in. Do you know that there are at least 20 leaders, Rafizi, Denchua, they're all going to jail. Anwar's already in jail. He spent 10 years of his life in prison. My parents, they're very scared. My mother, you know, I think even Mahade, Mohriz, and these are the people in politics. And they're already ordinary citizens who are being imprisoned only for saying what they believe is happening in the country. People are being sent to prison because of what they post on Facebook, because of what they tweet, just because they mention Najib, just because they mention. This is the reality that we are in today. My worry, my fear is that, you know, you have talented young people. I know that Rafizi and Ambiga, for example, don't see things eye to eye. But I think the whole premise of democracy, and a mature democracy, is that you have the right to say what you believe without being sent to prison. But that is not the Malaysia that we are in. But I believe that we can be much more than that. I believe that, you know, 60 years ago, 54 years ago, when Tunku Abdul Rahman, Lee Kuan Yew, and all of the founding fathers of Malaysia sat together and they came up and agreed to this project. Malaysia is a project. And if we don't work hard on the basis of democracy, I think we're going to lose the country. That is really what is at stake. That is really what is at stake. We've seen how a Chief Justice can be appointed in a very roundabout fashion, and this is without a 2/3 majority. Imagine what Najib and UMNO Barisan Nasional can do with 2/3 majority. And you've seen the successes of the federal opposition governing in Penang, governing in Selangor. Do you know, when we talk about DBKL, the budget of DBKL is practically equivalent to Selangor and Penang combined. Yet we have absolutely no say in what happens in DBKL. Do you know that Nurul Izzah, a member of parliament in Kuala Lumpur here, has very little say in what happens in DBKL? Do you know that, as a matter of fact, there is a case, if you know where SK Bangsar and Sri Dasmesh is, and there is a plot of land there, and it's being redeveloped next to the school, next to a temple, next to 2 schools. Nurul Izzah, as a member of parliament, sends a letter to the people who we believe are the owners of that piece of land and DBKL. 6 months later, nothing. There's no sense of accountability. There's no sense that she, as a member of parliament, should be accorded the right to some kind of answer. And I think this is the kind of DBKL that we have right now. In fact, we have to play many tricks. Sometimes we have to be very crafty or very creative in trying to engage DBKL. Maybe sometimes we have to engage in a roundabout fashion. I'll give you an example. Those of you who live in this area, if you know the Kari Kepala Ikan behind here, it's been a source of concern for the residents in Chenrai for the longest time. And I think they're trying to move the stalls. Yeah? Now, if Nurul Izzah were to bring that up, raise the legitimate concerns of the residents to DBKL, so we have to employ creative means, and thankfully they have found other ways. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to speak too long, because I think we have 3 panelists, so it's good for a 3-corner fight, and I'm sure many of you have questions about that. But as a young politician, as a young party leader, who also sits and, you know, I'm practically a fly on the wall seeing a lot of things that's happening. I see in our midst there are some young political leaders as well. And the future of Malaysia relies, it's heavily dependent on all of us. It's heavily dependent on young people like myself and those of you. I see the son of Khalid Samad, he's here. Yeah. People like us to let go of a lot of other profitable opportunities, to commit to our idea that Malaysia should be better, that we have to work hard to make sure that we bring that kind of change. And I think the last thing I want to say is that one of the big problems of politics is the idea that it ends at the ballot box. No. Politics is about engagement. It is about your everyday life. The idea that you can outsource democracy, you can give up your right to participate in society, I think that is a very big problem that we have in Malaysia. In fact, that is what they want to perpetuate. But that is, I think, what we need to change. Because, for example, some of you, any of you from the Lucky Garden Residents Association? No? Yeah. Getting involved in Residents Association, I see Dato Joseph is here from the Bangsar Residents Association. Getting involved in Residents Association is a form of getting involved in politics, yeah, at a very local level. And I think that's very important. Without which, you will let all of these big guys get away with a lot of things. And I think I'll end it there for now. And we can get to hear some questions, yeah, and then we'll go from there. Thank you. I think when it comes to Malaysian politics and the idea of hope, I think we have to be perpetual optimists. It's very difficult to survive in Parliament without the kind of resources, without the kind of machinery to serve even basic serving of constituents. So in the federal opposition, I think having helped Nuriza across 2 terms, actually, you know, the fears that we might kind of staffers might fall into kind of like, okay, it's okay, you know, we're still opposition, it's okay. But the fact of the matter is, we're there really because constituents voted with hope. I think this is a big picture issue, yeah. And it's something that those of us, for example, I myself would personally not like to see three-corner fights. But the reality is, some of those questions are beyond me to answer. My position can be quite clear. My position on certain issues, whether it's RUU 355, whether it's unilateral conversion, whether it's GST, it can differ from a lot of whatever the party leaders have decided, but I have to kind of stick by that. The thing is that really party leaders, political leaders, leaders in general, need to be having more really close-up conversations with people. Because that's where you really find out, you really learn what is at stake. For me, I mean, one of the most heartbreaking things was last week, during Raya Korban, we were going door to door, me and Nuriza, going door to door to send some contributions in PPR Kerinci, which is public housing. And we came across this family, and it was a man. He had lost his wife to cancer, and he has 5 children, and he had very little furniture in the room. It was just a TV, sofa, and that's about it. So we asked, like, hey, how come macam ni? Oh, we have to move from time to time because we cannot afford the rent. his 5 children are not going to school. One of them is 17 years old and hasn't gone to school the whole year. And we have a Malaysia. Najib is talking about committing billions overseas, and you have someone in Pantai Dalam who lives like this. I think there's a huge gap. Najib needs to be hearing this man, you know? And it is preposterous that we have this kind of condition. Earlier today, I asked a lady, what is your, who lives in one of the flats, what is your hope for yourself? I have been renting my whole life. I hope to own a house. I hope to own my own house. And she hopes to have a Malaysia that will look after her children. I don't know whether the Malaysia that we have right now is going to be able to help out that, you know. So to deal with the question of people might lose hope, and I think that's natural. And I think that, if anything, is an indicator to party leaders, like, wake up. People are tired of this kind of thing. This is where we need to go. This is what we need to do. This is what we believe needs to happen. And we need to do that. Of course, I have to say it in a roundabout way because it's a public forum. Yeah. But I think a lot of the leaders are very cognizant of the fact that the way things are going, we can't allow BN to not only remain in government, but to win a 2/3 majority. If we are not careful, that just might happen. And if that happens, I think we have to be prepared not for 1 more year, but probably 1 more decade. Because with 2/3 majority, Najib and UMNO BN can change the constitution. They can redelineate, they can create new seats, they can make it even more difficult for change to happen. So, I think I've just compounded on your fear. I don't think I've answered anything.
But it's the truth.
But it's the truth.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's a very difficult truth. We'll get to questions after this.
Yeah. For those who came in after I told you how would the format be, so we'll have just a few questions here, and then we'll open up. I know, as soon as possible, quickly to the floor. And we'll go straight to the floor? Alright, so we'll go straight to the floor. Let's take 3 questions at a time, and then have the panelists answer, and then 3 more questions. So 3 questions at a time. The gentleman at the back, yes.
There's 3 questions that's running in my mind. I just want to add a little bit with Fahmi's permission on DBKL. Right? Talking about DBKL accountability and transparency, even out of the 11 MPs of KL, right, 9 of them who are oppositions, they don't even have access to DBKL. So what are we talking about this, of transparency and accountability with DBKL? That's the main point that I want to stress. The other thing is, the 3 things that's running behind the mind is, what sort of democracy are we practicing in Malaysia? Right? If you talk of democracy, what is democracy? Number 2, we are talking of 2-party system. I've been, the last a couple of years, I've never seen a 2-party system. If you really would want to compare 2-party system, India is the best example, right? We always have one party here. The other party, it's either one or they are not collaborated as one. They have their differences, they have this. What hope and faith do we have on the opposition, right? That's number 2. Number 3, well, I'll drop the number 3 lah. That 2 is important.
Anyone else? Yes, gentleman in the back.
Ambiga said a while back, and I fully agree with her when you said that we pray and hope there will be a change of government. But in the same line, Ambiga, I've been reading the blogs about your comments, that this may not be a possibility if the opposition continues to be fractious, they continue to divide among themselves. And you had said actually, Ambiga, that I think anyway, the opposition's bugbear is pass. Now, in this particular instance, I think Pakistan Harapan is having a sort of a dilemma. I hope it isn't a big dilemma. With pass or not with pass. But I seem to think majority says no. And I fully agree because you cannot trust pass whatsoever. But you, Ambiga, you had said, you supported Azmin's comment that they should still have some kind of communication pass. I think you should not do it at all because there's not enough time left. You have to be very, very clear right now where you stand. Because if you continue with pass, you are going to go deeper into trouble. Because I still believe that pass is a Trojan horse right now in Malaysian politics. So I would like to hear comments on Ambiga on this.
Right on the spot.
We'll take one more question. Yes.
Actually, I've got two, but anyway. One question for Tricia. I think there's another C, which is conservative Islam, that I think is a very serious problem in this country. And we've got hudud laws being tabled. It's the whole country is increasingly becoming the Muslim Malays and the non-Muslims, and it's severely divided. And there's no official stopping of this conservative Islam movement.
Will repeat the question. Okay.
All right. Well, I just said that I think Tricia had mentioned about the C's, the four C's that are serious problems. I think there's one major problem is conservative Islam, and we're having hudud laws being tabled, and the country's increasingly becoming divided between Malay Muslims and non-Muslims, and billions are being given to Islamic entities or organizations like Jakim, etc., to promote conservative Islam. So that I think is very worrying, and I'd like your views on that. And the other thing is, if Pakistan makes it to Putrajaya, who will be Prime Minister?
Okay, I shall take all three, ambitious and young and okay, the first one to Mr. Hitesh. Tomorrow you come with me, we go stand picket in front of BBKL headquarters, okay? Alright, we do that. Is that okay? yeah. I think that's the kind of thing that we need to see actually. Mr. Bala, the proprietor of this lovely establishment, once reminded me that during V. David's time, when he was MP, what he would do is he would ferry people to City Hall for City Hall to hear every single grievance that they had. Every morning he would do that. So of course I won't be able to check because I'm not I haven't been around that long. But I imagine that if DBKL were to see people amassing in front of their headquarters every single day, and we bring the issues every single day, whether they like it or not, I think the mayor is not necessarily a bad guy. I think he's willing to listen. I've sat down in meetings, a meeting with him about the fee hike in parking fee hike. Even though the basis for rolling out that policy is flawed, we don't see any reduction in what do you call this, traffic coming into Kuala Lumpur. But at least he's willing to listen. Yeah? The thing that we need to move more towards is DBKL needs to understand that as ratepayers, yeah, there can be no taxation without representation. I believe in that. And I think the moment you remind DBKL that they are there by virtue of us paying, okay, maybe they may not fully understand that, but if we physicalize that, if we go out and we tell them, we stand out there, we've stood, for a lot of things, whether it was Bersih, whether it was women against toxic politics, yeah, we can stand up against the kind of lack of accountability of DBKL. And we cannot forget that there was a very senior DBKL man who was arrested by MECC, yeah, where it was claimed, didakwa, he had 30 luxury condominium units, yeah, in his name, which amounted to something like 15 million ringgit or something. Yeah. And we haven't heard the case. The case hasn't, I don't know what's the status of that case. So we were talking about corruption earlier, yeah. We haven't heard a single development on that case. And at the same time, we see lack of accountability, because I reiterate, the fact is, DBKL's annual budget, which they never release, we MPs can't get a hold of it. Only if you are an ahli lembaga, you're a board member, the advisory board of DBKL, will you get a copy. So MPs don't get to really scrutinize line by line, what do you need all this money for, what are the people who are getting the contract to do this, only we find out only through whatever's in the news, whatever is released. So I think we need to see more participatory form of democracy. We need to see more direct democracy in Malaysia. We need to see more people on the ground, in the streets, in front of City Hall. Yeah. Because the thing is, with Bersih, when we manifested ourselves in the streets, yeah, I think they had to take that into consideration. They have to take it seriously. So I hope those of you who are worried about the other C, actually it's a K, kleptocracy, by Anzuka. There's a C somewhere in there. If you're worried, 14th of October, let's come out to Padang Timur in PJ, very close by. Yeah, there's A&W there. There's
GST.
GST, yeah. My father went for dates with my mom at A&W, so you must be there. Yeah, I hope you come out. When we physicalize, manifest our disagreement through these kind of protests, whether they like it or not, they must take it into consideration. Ronnie's question is very thorny, so I'll let Ambiga deal with that. I have my own personal position on it. The party's position is what Aziza has announced before, what Anwar has announced before. We can agree, we can disagree. I think that's the beauty of democracy. It is to allow this kind of very robust dialogue and discourse to take place without threats, without the fear of reprisal. And I think what Chako raised, your question was on conservative Islam. Yes. And who will be the next Prime Minister? Okay. I'll just touch on conservative Islam as well. No, Musadik says don't answer. Okay, I want to. I think no, he's just joking. He's just joking. I think the term is quite misunderstood. I think that there is when you employ a term like conservatism, of course we understand it in a particular way. There is for PKR, for keadilan, we must engage in a discourse that allows us to understand nuances and to appreciate that. It's very difficult. I've had numerous discussions with Ira about this. As Muslims, we have our faith. Yeah? I have my particular belief as laid down in the Quran, as well as the sayings of the Prophet. And I think we need to also acknowledge that the Malaysia that we live in is very, very dynamic and must allow for the meetings of these differences to be resolved in a very civil fashion, in a civilized way, that at the same time as it allows the philosophical debates to be expanded and expounded on, it also encourages an understanding of difference, of the other. This is one thing which I feel Malaysia, in the haste for development, has made us less granular in the way we think about difference. It has reduced us to Melayu, Cina, India, as opposed to Minangkabau, Bugis, Boyan. If we were to tell, there's a joke among the top leaders of Pakatan Harapan. We need an Indian. Gobin. Oh, I'm not an. I'm Sikh. Oh, okay. Sorry. I know. But it's kind of like a friendly joke. But actually, that leads me to the last question. Yeah, I think when Tricia mentioned that when we mentioned earlier that this opposition is probably the most cohesive that we have seen. Actually, it's very true. I can tell you because I witness it every day. I have too many meetings with all these people, even the people from PPPM. You know, you imagine that people have asked before, can you trust Mahathir? I think that's not an issue, because Mahathir has stated his position very clearly. And as a reform-based party, my belief is that you must allow people the room to reform themselves. If you want to talk about reforming society, you must give people the room. But they must make good on the faith that you have given. If they betray that faith, then we must take things to account. Yeah. So to answer your question, without answering your question, I've answered your question.
I think we will pass it to Tricia first, and then have Ambiga answer the very hot question.
Okay, thank you. I want to also answer the issue of DBKL. So you know that there are not one but two administrative territories that were taken out of Selangor. So I mean, we all know history, right? KL used to be part of Selangor. It was taken out of Selangor partly because there was, as today, most of the support for the opposition came from the very urban center of Kuala Lumpur. The other administrative territory taken out was Putrajaya. So what I do know, and I'm actually doing this for my research, is that when Putrajaya, when the bill was tabled in the Selangor Assembly, State Assembly, the opposition leaders actually walked out in protest because they disagreed with Putrajaya being taken out of Selangor. So you have actually both KL and Putrajaya that have no representation for people who pay tax. So that taxation without representation phrase is spot on. If any of you live in KL, if you vote in KL, you should definitely put your foot down because you don't know where your money is going to. And you know, Kuala Lumpur is at the very heart of where decisions are being made. So that's on the issue of DBKL. I know that Ronnie addressed that question to Ambiga, but I have some reflections as well, which is that I won't talk about what's currently happening because I'm not definitely I'm not the fly on the wall as Fahmi says. But I would just say this, that historically, parties on different sides of the divide have been able to come together to negotiate seats without being in coalition necessarily. This happened in 2008. If you remember, the three parties were actually not in coalition at the time of the vote. At the time of the vote of the election, Pakatan Rakyat did not exist. Pakatan Rakyat came into being only after the March 8, 2008 election. So I'll just stop there without saying anything further. The issue of Islam and hudud and all that. Yeah, the terminology is tricky because you can't say conservatism because conservatism means that perhaps you're actually adhering to your own belief system, and very much the same thing as conservative, whatever it is, Hinduism or Christianity, perhaps that's actually what they do essentially hold on to. Sometimes the term is actually just pure racism, right? So, and we do know that bodies such as Jakim and others are being given a lot of money to promote a certain kind and a certain brand of Islam. I'm not sure what is the exact term that we might want to use. Maybe it's Puritanism instead. On that note, actually it's quite interesting. I just attended this very morning the soft launch of this thing called the Pusat Pembinaan Bangsar. So Selangor, if you don't know, has this think tank called Institute Darul Ihsan, IDE. And we just launched, and I've just been invited to be part of this committee, which is essentially like a national unity committee under the state of Selangor. And I think it's been too late, it was too long in the making. I mean, Selangor has been taken over by opposition for how many years now, and only now they're actually talking about Selangor being able to show the difference. And here I think is where the opposition can actually shine. Pakatan is already in a state. It can show how its policies are different. Its policies are not to a specific race, to a specific religion. And my challenge to the state actually this morning was to say that while we know that the federal government is intentionally, implicitly or explicitly promoting a certain brand of conservatism, for the lack of a better word, why can't the state also do the same thing but to promote something that's more inclusive? So what I said is, if the federal government is promoting politics based on race and religion, politics based on hate, why can't the state, being represented by Pakatan as an opposition, promote a politics based on love and inclusivity and tolerance, or actually not tolerance, but more celebrating of diversity? We have to be clear that it's not necessarily the people themselves, but that it is being state-driven and it's being sponsored by the government and by certain political leaders. Yeah, so I'll just stop there.
Okay, I've got the difficult one from Ronnie. Okay, let me say this, all right? Let me start with this. In the last general elections, we all, many of us, I mean, I didn't have to vote for PAS, I'm in Segambut, but many of my friends actually voted for PAS because they were part of the coalition. And I remember encouraging it, and I remember some of my friends saying, "Are you sure you can trust them?" And I said, "Yes, you can trust them." And then I had to eat my words when they, the leadership, not the people on the ground, when the leadership switched. Because you don't do that to the voters. You don't go on a particular platform and then switch and join the very person that the voters voted against. So to me, that is unacceptable. And I blame the leadership, because I know that the people on the ground, many of them are not happy, because they've been fighting UMNO and Barisan Nasional all their lives. So they don't understand this shift either. Right, that's the background. I just want to make my position clear on that. The reason I say don't have three corner fights is this. It's not enough just to go to the ground, etc., etc. You need to be strategic to win this election. All I'm suggesting is not working with PAS. I'm suggesting an electoral arrangement or pact with them. As Tricia said, they've done it before. They've done it before. And they were, PAS was always about hudud and etc., etc. That was the position then too. Hello? That was the position then as well. But they still managed to come together and create a pact. Now, so what I'm suggesting by way of an electoral pact is this. Come to an agreement with PAS that they don't run in X constituency, so you don't knock me out. I don't run in Y constituency, so I don't knock you out. That's all. That's it. That is all I am suggesting. And if you say, oh, PAS can, because how do you know you can trust PAS? Well, I trust their desire for power. I trust their desire for power. They don't want to lose all their seats either. Okay? But you may still say, yeah, but you still don't know. Yeah, assume the worst. When you negotiate and when you go into elections like this, you assume the worst. And then if it turns out well, good for you. And you prepare for the worst. But the basic premise must be this. It is much easier to win if it is a straight fight. If we can all agree on that, that to me is my basic premise. That as far as possible, as many seats as possible should be straight fights, because you make life easier for yourself. That's it. That's all I'm saying. You may succeed, you may not succeed. There will be three corner fights in many places, so be it. That you take on. But you continue negotiating until you minimize three corner fights. I'm not saying you work with them after that or anything. You're shaking your head, Ronnie. I would like to know why later. You don't have to work with them or anything. You just do that, that's all. But it is being misrepresented. What I'm saying, and what many of us who are against three-corner fights are saying, what we are saying is just electoral pact. But they go around saying that we are suggesting you work with PAS as a member of the coalition. That is not true. That is not what we're saying. We're saying be strategic. And why do I say we will lose three-corner fights? That's my take on three-corner fights. You can never win three-corner fights. Only Barisan Nasional wins three-corner fights. I had a conversation with Chin Tong yesterday. She was kind enough to meet me. I said, look, I need to understand this. We talked. He didn't convince me, and I didn't convince him. So we didn't progress very much. But let me tell you where I base my thinking on. I don't base it on polls and statistics and so on. I base it on history, on what's happened in the past. 90%, okay, sometimes you get three-corner fights where there's an independent. That you can win. But when it is political parties, established political parties, opposition has never won a three-corner, or 90% of the time never wins a three-corner fight. I would say almost 100%. Let's look at Sungai Besar and Kuala Kangsar. Three-corner fight. The same arguments were put forward. We can win this three-corner fight. Because I remember also saying then, look, are you sure you want to do this? They said, no, we can win. So we all jalan. They said they can win, let's go for it. What happened? It cannot. The figures just don't work out. Urban areas and all, maybe yes. That's a different calculation altogether. Different constituencies you have to look at differently. Constituencies like Sungai Besar and Kuala Kangsar, which are semi-urban, alright? Urban to semi-urban. It's tough. It's really tough. So I'm going on historical data because as a lawyer, I go by that. Those who are proposing the three-corner fights are going on studies that they have done. Fair enough. I'm not, look, ultimately they have to make the final decision. But to me, it's a kamikaze move. To me, it's kamikaze. And you know what the fear is? BN will get 2/3 if you do that. That's my fear. So all I'm suggesting, this is all I'm saying is, please minimize it. I know it's inevitable in some areas, but minimize it because it is a risk. It is not 100% certainty that they're going to win three-corner fights. It's a risk. And is it a risk worth taking that BN comes back with a 2/3 majority? I guarantee you we will never come back from that. So all I'm saying is be strategic. I'm not asking you to work. That's why I get irritated because it's deliberately being manipulated and misrepresented as us saying that you should work with them in a coalition. That's not what we're saying. All I'm saying is attempt to be smart and try and get as many straight fights as you can. If you can't after trying, fair enough, then no one will blame you. But you don't just put your foot down and say, that's it, we're not going to, because I think we are heading for trouble in that instance. That's all. It's just my point of view. I disagree with your party's stand on that.
And I have to now defend my party's position.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add. I think if you were to kind of boil it down, maybe you could say that versus principles. Yeah. So I think for a lot of people out there who are disenchanted, who are perhaps they may not like how things are going with certain political parties, maybe they feel that that's enough, and I think that's a fair thing to say. It's a fair position to take, because like what Dato Ambiga mentioned, if you voted for someone on a particular platform and this person then does not commit to that platform later, I mean that's the whole reason why David Cameron had to step down. Yeah. I mean that is the right thing to do in terms of principles, in terms of when you talk about democracy, when you talk about politics, that is the right thing to do. At the same time, when we talk about pragmatism, we talk about what is at stake for the country. What is at stake if we give 2/3 majority to UMNO BN? It's also a dilemma. So this is our modern Malaysian dilemma right now, facing each and every one of you. And I'm not here to dictate, to tell you what to think. I think this is something that we have to sit down at, for example, at Bala's and promoting Bala's. You have a very good teh tarik and very good, and have these kind of conversations which are very, very important, not only for us to make up our minds, because according to a recent survey, more than 50% of the electorate has made up their mind already who they're going to vote for. And in fact, the next quarter will make up their minds the moment parties name a candidate on nomination day. Done. 75% practically done by the time you hit nomination day. Now, I think the existential question, or the most important, the most critical, crucial question facing us today: what are we willing to give up to make sure that our hopes, our dreams for a better Malaysia comes true? I think this is a very difficult question that we need to ask. And I think it is a very important question, difficult question that we need to ask and engage in a dialogue about. Yes, Ronnie, you wanted to...
Yeah, I just want to say, the part of today is also part of yesterday. One of my biggest admirers was King Aziz. He was a great man, he was also very inclusive. But not today's leader. And that is why Aman has broken up from us. So therefore, I do think, I don't believe that today's powers has really feel as abused out of and yet you will say to them, I think that's why you must make a stand now and not later. If you make a stand later, you might lose everything. And you might lose a loser. I would rather, after today, declare a stand now and move forward. That's my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. Okay. I don't want to belabor the point. I think we have very strong positions. Yeah, and I think if Dato Ambiga and Liu Chin Tong can't also what more us, right? Mere mortals. Okay. But I'll give you a very simple example. Yeah, all of this is happening in what we call awang-awangan. A lot of this is happening, you know, like above and beyond our realm of control, what we are able to do. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, on the ground, which is where it matters most, I'll give you an example. Tengku Hilmi, yeah, he's a friend who apparently is still a past member, but he's a friend. And I think this is the kind of granularity which is very difficult for us to accept. And yet there are these instances. How do we accommodate? How do you find a language of politics that does not lead to the kind of bitterness? How can we, maybe this is proposing something, you know, far bigger than what this forum originally sets out to do. But I think it's very important for us to be able to imagine, is it possible that we find some way, like what Tricia mentioned, on the eve of election day in 2008, there was no coalition. And yet, somehow, of course at that time, Anwar Ibrahim was out. And he was a master negotiator. So I think, politics being the art of the possible, I think we might be able to see some surprises yet. I think don't think that we, you know, don't discount anything just yet. Yeah. But I take note of what Ronnie has said, and I think Dato Ambiga wants to have a...
No,
okay, I'll pass it.
No, I completely understand how you feel, Ronnie, but I feel the same way. But when you look at the ground, and if you, I mean, let's be frank about it, the next election will be won by a shift in the Malay vote. Okay? So that's where I'm coming from. The urban will think differently. we do think differently. But where it is needed is in the semi-urban and rural areas. So that, I think that shift needs to happen. And I think it can only happen if you're not fighting these three corner fights where you're splitting the Malay vote particularly into three. It's got to be a straight fight. It's just a view. I understand how you feel. I feel as strongly about some of those views that you have. I am just saying this is politics, real politics. You want to win the elections, you also have to be strategic. I'm not sitting down with them anything for anything beyond agreeing, you don't run here, we don't run here. That's it. Yeah, that's what I mean.
3 more questions? Yes.
My question is to Fahmi. You talked about a better Malaysia. There can never be a better Malaysia as long as we talk about race and religion. People are people, we are all Malaysians, we have to look beyond race and religion. So my question to you is this. In all the years that Pakatan has been around, what has Pakatan done, what has PKR done to rid Malaysia of the scourge of speaking of race and religion? Because I believe that many people vote for the status quo because of this fear that their race and religion might be affected if they don't stay with that status quo. What has Pakatan done to educate the people that race and religion doesn't matter? We are all human beings, the same red blood runs through all our veins. And we're not going to progress, this country is not going to progress if we don't see beyond that. And we complain about it when it happens in other countries, in South Africa, in the Western countries, where we say, how can white people think they're superior to colored people or black people? But we are doing the same here. And what has PKR done to get rid of that? Because once you get rid of that perception, people will start looking at values and merit as opposed to race and religion. And we will move forward. We will be very advanced because there are plenty of fantastic and brilliant Malaysians around. So that's my question to you. And the second question to you, sorry, question to you, is the leadership of the opposition does not seem to be strong and cohesive. I understand it's made up of different parties, there are strong personalities, etc. But when there is a coalition, there must be some semblance of a common position and some leadership coming out of it. And I think that is worrying for people who want to vote for the opposition. And it's actually, look, there's some people who are going to vote for you anyway because they just want to change, okay? But there will be people who are sitting on the fence. So you need to look at those people, and you need to look at the people in the rural areas who may be concerned about their position. They're scared if they vote for the opposition. And why are people scared of any one race? Like, I can't understand that. What are you guys doing about it?
It's close to 10:30, so we'll take up 2 more questions. Anyone? Yes, at the back. Why is this election, the 14th general election, called the mother of all elections? Okay, that's the question. One more? Last one, yes?
It's statistically impossible to win the elections without having Sabah and Sarawak on board. I don't see anyone talking about Sabah and Sarawak coming on board to sway the results, and it will be impossible to win. I mean, any common sense, people with common sense should realize that it is impossible to win these elections if Sabah and Sarawak doesn't come on board. So what are you doing about it? What is the opposition doing about it? That's my question. Thank you.
Sorry, I have to take these 3 questions. Okay, actually they're very, very fantastic questions. Yeoh, thank you for not throwing a shoe at me. But I can say this. Yeah? One of the... See, I personally grew up in a household where my father said, I'm not sending you to an all-Malay school. I had the opportunity to go to a very premier so-called all-Malay school. And my father said no, because he worked in Felda, so he's aware he wanted me to see more. And I ended up being the only non-Chinese in my class by the time I finished secondary school. So I'm a little bit different. One of the reasons why I decided to join PKR, Parti Rakyat Keadilan, is that because I feel that out of all of the political parties, especially around 2010 when I joined the party, I had been helping PKR in Bangsar, in Lebak Pantai since 1999. But it was because I think some of the things that Anwar Ibrahim said, one of which was to replace Ketuanan Melayu with Ketuanan Rakyat, for example, and to change the new economic policy with a Malaysian economic agenda. And I think this kind of, I wouldn't use the word deracialization, but I think it's striking at the heart of the question, which is inequality. Now, Malaysia, when we gained independence, I think Malaya, when we gained independence, we had certain very specific socio-political constructs. And as a result of that, the kind of economy that was grown ended up being what it is. And I think after the tumult of 1969, which subsequently resulted in the annexation of Kuala Lumpur, the lens through which we viewed politics and the body politic became very narrow. And it was political expediency which kept it going. And it will keep it going. It will keep, the lens is useful to the powers that be, those who are in power right now. Now the difficulty that Anwar presents, his problematization of the question of race, he's asking political leaders to ask what exactly is the problem. It's not ethnic group, it's actually inequality. But how can we address the question of inequality because while at the same time the lexicon, the vocabulary, the jargon that we have is so, it needs to be deconstructed. So it is actually a very ambitious political project, which I think you can apply any kind of postmodernist theory, you know, to kind of like really unpack and really kind of go through. But I feel that Keadilan has managed to, and also of course, DAP has led the way for a very long time, right? But Keadilan also, as a predominantly Malay party, you know, we have a very significant number of non-Malay members. And as a result of that, the discussions, the discourse among the leadership is very robust and is very sensitive to the question of what you raised. That's why some of the announcements that we've made about, you know, it's not Ketuanan Melayu, it is Ketuanan Rakyat. How do we empower the people? That has been at the forefront of a lot of our campaigns, a lot of our work. Actually, this is something that probably we can continue much more after this. Suffice to say that a lot of the leaders are cognizant of the fact that we need to move beyond. Because we can't hope for a better Malaysia if we keep the rhetoric, the same language, the same tools that we currently use. We can't. And it is being translated into certain very specific policies, like for example, the Malaysian economic agenda, which Anwar Ibrahim spoke about around 2008-2009. Now, the second one was on
Why is this the mother of all elections?
why is this the mother of all elections? Apparently, Lim Kit Siang mentioned this in GE14. Yeah. Well, you know, Lim Kit Siang is Lim Kit Siang. Sorry to our DAP Depsi friends, but sometimes he can be wrong. So perhaps GE13 was not the mother of all elections. Maybe it's GE14. Actually, I just wanted a lot of people to come. So I guess it worked. I guess it worked. But that's being yes, Ronnie.
Last question is on PDK. I DBKL. I don't know whether you're aware, but when this annexation took place, it was decreed in the charter that two representatives of DBKL advisory board must come from the state of Islam. I've said this to the DBKL leadership of Mata a few times. You got two slots of seats in DBKL, and what if you doesn't want it? You can use these two slots, to be great Dato people, to stir the pot, do something for the citizens of Yeoh. So I think we must bring this back to your leadership, to your deputy president who is also the country of struggle. Can you please send this? Not too late now. Put two people in DBKL and let them know support wherever you put two passive person.
Ronnie, I'm very sorry, but because it's already 10:30, just very quickly wrap that up.
Yes, I get your point. But I think we have to move even more than that, which is actually I think we may need to vote for our mayor, for example. I think we need to move towards that. Move towards some kind of local council election so that we have a more real representation of people's how people feel. I know that there's some people who are ready and not ready, but I think there are many models that we can look at. And I think this is actually very necessary. We've spoken about this before. And I know my colleagues in DAP have been very vociferous when it comes to a question of local council elections. There were people who were kind of like a bit uncertain. But I can tell you this, and it's linked to the question that you raised, sir, about Sabah and Sarawak. Actually, our leaders will be flying to both Kota Kinabalu and Kuching very soon, at a date that I will not announce here, for fear that they will be stopped from entering. And when this event does take place, we will make some announcements, because the commitment of the Presidential Council is we need to start articulating, stating, announcing our manifesto. So I've seen some of it. There's a lot which needs to be looked at in greater detail. There are a lot of stakeholders that we are speaking to. I can't reveal what we have said, but we have said, for example, on Felda, the commitment, we have 5 things that we are committed to. We will be making very clear policy pronouncements with regards to the reform of political institutions, reform to politics as well as to our democratic institutions, very necessary. But all of these plans can only take place if we win. And that's where we come back to the question of, is this going to be the mother of all elections? So you can't run away from the interconnectedness of what Dato Ambiga and Ronnie debated about. The question of what's going to happen, what are the kind of race-based politics, or what's going to happen with Sabah and Sarawak, for example. That's why we have to look at it in a big picture kind of way. So soon, very soon, we will be making some announcements, and I think now we will be wrapping up. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for all your questions. If time allowed, we would like to hear more of your questions. But right now we've got to end, so each speaker will have 1 minute just to wrap up.
Okay, I started off saying that we're celebrating Malaysia Day in a couple of days. So I just want to close by saying that Malaysia was actually not formed under exuberant circumstances. We actually were formed under tense circumstances. The inclusion of Sabah, Sarawak, Singapore at the time, even the states within Peninsula, they were worried, they were afraid about what kind of future their own states would have. So in a sense, it's true that Malaysia was a project, but it's a project that I think could have succeeded because of, again, the geographical location we were in, the talents that we have. So the question is, where are we today? Somebody asked just now, democracy, right? And I think Fahmi was saying something like, in any other democracy. Actually, my question would be, are we really a democracy any longer today? I go to a lot of these international forums, and recently when I was at one particular event in South Korea, an international event on democracy, I was explaining about Malaysia as a parliamentary democracy, blah blah blah, the usual explanation, and the people actually stood up and said, is Malaysia really a democracy when you have your opposition leader put into jail under very dubious circumstances? So that, I think, is something that we need to ask ourselves. On this issue of race and religion, yes, we've seen increasingly that there are a lot of race and religious issues being brought up. But perhaps that's actually intentional because the stakes are high. Never before has it been so close for the Barisan Nasional to actually lose government. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, who is actually provoking these issues on the ground? Is it us? Is it the communities ourselves? Is it the people? Or is it actually being state-sponsored? And when I say state, I don't mean state government. Are the provocations real or provoked? Somewhere along, we were also talking about whether people will lose hope and so on. I think as reflecting upon the work that I've been doing and that other people have been doing over the last decade, I guess the question is, the middle class, perhaps we can survive on some of our savings, but if the country really goes down the drain, and if all the monies are being used to bail out companies that don't deserve to be bailed out, who suffers? It's the people who have absolutely no savings, the people who fall through the cracks. They can't leave, they can't sell their assets and move up to a different country. They are stuck here in this country. And who else is going to be here fighting for them? I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier on in my final point, which is that elections is messy, it's difficult, there will be no perfect conditions from this time until the day you die. There will not be a perfect condition under which you have to choose the best party, you know, the party that ticks all your boxes, that fulfills all your criteria, fulfilling all the obligations that you ever wanted. But I do feel, as I said, that this is the time that you have to make a decision. Not voting means the incumbents win, actually. If you spoil your vote, if you don't go out to vote, unfortunately that's the reality. The incumbents will win. The choice is really now, and yeah, Musadik, I do think it is the mother or father or whatever of all elections. Thank you.
Thanks, Tricia. Okay, I think what we're going to see in the next elections, and that's why I'm happy to see Fahmi striking out, is younger candidates, and I think that is something that is really going to change things up in the next elections. I hope there will be more. So we are very appreciative, Fahmi, that you're giving up your life for the country, literally. But let me tell you, what the problem we have is that 3.8 million eligible voters are not registered. If we had even half of them, or 25% registered, you can change the government. You know, so it is a tragedy. We pushed it as hard as we can, and in fact, let me tell you, if elections are next year, then we have till, say, the 25th of September, in the next 2 weeks, to register. So if you know anyone who hasn't registered, please get them to register. I don't know whether it's mainly the youth, by the way. The statistics show it's mainly youth. Are they disillusioned? Do they find nothing, you know, what is it? I'm not sure what it is, but I would really like to find out. Okay, now then finally I would say this, that, and by the way, Ronnie, if they decide to go for 3 corner, I will be praying that I was wrong. And I will be the happiest if I turn out to be wrong, okay? Because I want them to win. That's it. I want them to win, and I'm suggesting the best way forward. Now, finally though, I think we will have some 3-corner fights, regardless. The only thing that's going to work is if our turnout is huge. Frankly, whether it's 3-corner or even straight fights, but particularly if there are 3-corner fights, I think the support of the people. No matter what you think or what you feel, this is the time to give change a try, to make sure we bring change. Because my fear is that if we don't do it this time, I don't know, but you know what? Change takes time. I don't think we should ever be disillusioned. Sometimes we take it step by step, change takes time, but a large voter turnout. Of course, last time we had 85%. We don't know if they were all Malaysians lah. Yes, yes. That was the other problem. But very high voter turnout. But we need to push it. We need to push that and make sure come what may, we cast our vote in the next elections, literally for a better Malaysia. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, this is my 1-minute pitch. We have a donation box in the back. That's one. The second one is we need people. Every single one of you. Those of you who live in Bangsar, those of you who live in Lebah Pantai, those of you who live in Kuala Lumpur and PJ, we need every single one of you. This fight is going to be one of probably the dirtiest because the stakes are too high. We need you to do many little things because it is the many little things that will help us to win. It includes telling your siblings, your family members who are overseas, save some money because when Najib calls for elections, you need to fly back. And vote. Nalina, you also.
Yes.
Yeah? Going off to do your whatever law thing, you come back as well. Uncle, yes, you must allow her. Okay, save money. The father, Nalina's father is it. The other very important thing is that we need to start organizing at a grassroots level. I know some of you are people who live in Bangsar. I know I'm looking at those of you who are, okay. We need to start having things at a neighborhood level. Having things at a place like this is nice, but Bala's banana leaf is a business and there are costs. We want to try and minimize to make sure that we spend every legitimate ringgit in the elections. It's going to be a very tough elections, and if you are willing to volunteer to help here in Lebah Pantai, please sign up in the back, tick in the column that says volunteer in Lebah Pantai. And one more thing, volunteer you can do many ways. Yeah? Either by hosting a small talk session where we can discuss in greater detail the finer points raised by Ronnie and Dato Ambiga, or about racism, or about conservatism. Yeah? But also we need people to come out to become pachas, or polling agents and counting agents. On polling day, if you're casting your vote, that's one way. The other is to protect everybody's vote. Because if we don't do that, it's gone. And those of you who remember in 2013 at Jalan Bangkok, we actually stopped a car because people were suspicious. Hey, this is driver, who's this guy? Hey, he said, I'm no guy. Oh, why is he carrying the box? So we have to fire up our engines. It's going to be a long dark night. Hopefully there's bright daylight at the end. But even if there is not, I mean, I don't want to talk about that. But we are in this together. I believe that those of you who are here and who stayed on for this long, you want to see a better Malaysia. Help us. Help yourselves. Help the future. The time is now. Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Thank you for staying this long. I feel that this kind of forums are very important, where it's not the large scale forums where few hundred people come and then just listen and go back home. But these smaller scale discussions are very important, so that we know what you are thinking and what you have in your minds, and you can actually come up and ask us these questions during the forum, and also after this forum, you can always come up to it, the three of the